Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode, Season 6. Oh, my goodness. It's gone by so fast. Season 6 of The Green Agenda by Young, Gifted, and Green. And y'all know how we do. Before we get started, first and foremost, I'd like to give a great big shout out and a thank you to our sponsors, the Climate Action Campaign and the Environmental Defense Fund. Woo, woo. Yay. And the crowd goes wild. This one, look, y'all know I have a treat for y'all. Anytime you see this face, you know we lit, okay? For the first episode of Season 6, we are joined by the one, the only, the famous LaTricea Adams.
Yay, hey y'all.
Welcome in. Before we get started, for those who may not know, if you're not true to this, you new to this. For those who do not know, what should our audience know about you, girl?
Yeah, so this is a really big year for us. We are turning 10. So we are turning 10 on February the 10th. Even though, I'm still 25.
That's a golden year.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my goodness.
It is. It's still really hard to believe. But I'm super excited. Specifically as both a woman founded organization and a Black woman founded organization, we beat all the odds. When you think about startups, like not just with like businesses, but nonprofits as well, like they may not make it 2 or 3 years. So making it to 10 years, especially after the chaos that we'll get into 2025 with nonprofits, I'm really so grateful that like we're here. We still got our partners. We still make an impact in community. We still standing on EJ business, period, regardless. So, I'm still optimistic and looking forward to the next decade and the next decade of this work. So,
yes. Wait, and did you say, so what is your position with YGG? I don't know if you know.
So, I am the founder, CEO, and president of Young, Gifted, and Green. Once upon a time, we used to be called Black Millennials for Flint, and it has just been, mind-blowing to go from doing water donation drives to, like, talking to Congress, being in the White House,
I'm talking about in it.
All that, talking about in it. Is the ancestors are proud.
Mm-hmm.
It has truly been a journey, and I am really looking forward to what the future may bring. I'm looking forward to continuing to invest into young people. That has always been the core of this organization, is to truly not just only pour into young people, but also to give them opportunities to lead. Mm-hmm. When I got started with this work, as I had to go back, I'm like, how old was I? I was 29.
Hello.
I was 29.
Even though you're still 25.
I know, right? I got Benjamin Button. But I was 29, when the organization got started. So I'm like, I went through, like my coming of age, with this work. So, big year, big things, for Young, Gifted, and Green for sure.
That is so exciting. Okay, so now that we're fully acquainted, I just want to say, look, this is so full circle for me, right? Tracy brought me into this work. Tracy, affectionately known to us, brought me into this work, brought me into this space. Several years ago, almost 4 years ago, we met with me serving on a panel for this very talk show, and now several years later, I'm on my third season of hosting, and so big shout out, big flowers to you. So excited for y'all to hit double digits, and we gonna get right into it because it's a lot of things.
It's a lot.
It's a lot for us to discuss. 2025 was a year.
Ooh, child.
And now that we in the new year, let's recap. Okay. So last year, for the premiere episode of season 5 of The Green Agenda, we sat down together in these very seats and talked about the future of EJ justice, environmental justice, with the incoming administration. Now, a year later, approximately, January 2025 proved to be the beginning. Okay. And so now with the Justice 40 being cut and initiatives but environmental protections being weakened. Even worse, you have now, it feel like we, because we are one.
I know, right?
You experienced some personal attacks alongside the structural shifts that happened last year. So in this challenging time, how can environmental justice organizations and individuals still stand on EJ business like y'all been doing for a decade, despite federal interference?
Yeah, so I'm ready to tell my story.
Yes!
So I mean, like the timing, like is crazy. So literally, shortly after we aired that first episode of season 5, I was coming off of my appointment with WEJAC, or the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council.
A great honor.
Which, we knew that we would get fired, but we didn't know how and we didn't know when. So as soon as the administration came in, I mean, within days, there was an immediate rollback of all things EJ. Even the language and terminology of environmental justice was essentially like banned, like it's a dirty word, right? And so, as the EJ activist and really leaning into the EJ community, specifically from our elders. So my favorite EJ warrior and my personal mentor, the one and only Dr. Beverly Wright. I remember having a conversation with her and just being like, I'm scared. Like, this is crazy. And she looked at me and she said, this is not the first time we've experienced this, right? It may be the first time, for people within my generation, your generation, Gen Alpha, so on and so on, where we haven't seen this level of blatant racism. Like, it's disgusting, right? But even beyond that, when I think about the work that I do with the organization, I'm a daughter of the National Urban League. The National Urban League, we are the power brokers. We are the sons and daughters of Whitney M. Young. And a lot of the work that I do, kind of reflects that, right? Not to, say that, I won't stand on business, but it's just a certain way as the way that we maneuver and navigate with this work. It was just interesting that I would be attacked. So, in the latter part of the Biden-Harris administration, there was a huge investment from EPA around environmental justice. One of the grant programs was called the Community Change Grant. It was the first of its kind. I mean, it truly reflected years of feedback that came from community leaders, frontline organizations. And so we worked weeks and weeks and weeks, my God, and weeks. I think that application is like 60-something pages.
Man.
Worked on this application, did our due diligence. We're working in community, brought on other community organizations. I mean, it was beautiful. We got the grant. We got that grant.
Deservedly.
Period. We did our due diligence. We're doing the work. We got support from like our mayor. We got positive, support from even our utility provider. We also got support from the Congressman Cohen. And so I still had this like gut feeling like, this is great. I'm glad, that we were awarded, but I'm like, I don't really think we're going to be able to move forward. I really predicted that it would be rolled back because we had already discussed that, in the environmental community. And so still, moving ahead, being compliant, following all the rules. So in Black History Month, February 2025, I received an email from a very conservative publication that pretty much was asking making an erroneous connection between me being a White House appointee and getting this grant. Now, let me make this clear. I didn't get a penny.
Hello.
Okay, being a White House appointee. It was absolutely free labor. And then even separate and apart from that, we went through the same rigorous process with our application. So even if there was some type of issue, the issue wouldn't be with the organization, it would be with the agency, right? And so, conservatives took that and ran with it. It made its way to Fox News. I was doxxed. I received hate mail, very racist, racial slurs. Luckily, to be honest, I don't mess with Twitter or X like that anyway, but those people were going crazy. On Twitter is probably where it was the most. It was nasty. It was nasty. I tried to really contain it, which we did. A lot of people didn't know until literally this year. Shout out to the Phillips Agency, which is a Black woman PR firm based in the South. But the biggest thing was I didn't want other people within my tribe to be impacted. Absolutely. So I just took it, the best way that I could. It was very stressful. And then the symbolism with it happening in Black History Month, during Black History Month. That's not lost on me, right? And so, I really took that with grace. I know a lot of people were like, you okay? I got an outpouring, of love and support and general concern and people being fearful, my God, because a lot of, other activists, not even just in the environmental space. I know they ran 3 stories, 4 if you include the story from Fox News. There was even mentioning from leadership, in interviews from federal agencies. It was insane. But you know what? I'm from Memphis. It is what it is.
That ain't even nothing to a G.
I feel like I probably should have been more oh my God, I'm so scared, but I wasn't. So, praise God for Black attorneys. I dare you to put my name back in your mouth, right? So, the advice that I would give to, activists that are terrified, I would be remiss not to acknowledge the pure chaos that we're seeing right now. But I am a person of faith. I'm a person of faith, and I know that I'm doing what God told me to do. And if I am moving in the way that God told me to do it, that's why I'm really not afraid. God gonna take care of whoever is trying to prevent his work to be done.
Yeah.
I would also, say, stand on business. Don't mince your words, because we can't let this movement that is decades long, that were built by Black people, to be erased, right? We can't. And nothing that, even this was nasty work, it still doesn't compare to what our ancestors endured, right? So, those are the things that I, think about to keep me grounded. And, I hope that others, when they feel downtrodden, that they lean into the spirit of the ancestors to keep them motivated to push through, because we still got to stand on it, because we have not overcome.
We're not there.
We're not there yet.
We shall, but we
not yet.
I feel like there's so much. I mean, first and foremost, your well-being was put at risk, right? And I think so often we talk about this idea of the personal is political, right? And the political is personal, but that's a different level, right? Yeah. To have it hit your doorstep, right? To be living in a digital age and have your reputation attacked, not simply just your character, which is a whole another issue, right? But to have your reputation attacked as a Black businesswoman, right? I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. That's what I'm thinking about in my head, right? So I think that in and of itself deserves to hold space, right? That what's dangerous in this age of mis and disinformation, right, is that so often humanity is lost in translation, that we forget that we are talking about real people with real lives and real stories who are experiencing, you know, the backlash of what Fox News just posted as a short few-minute clip, right? The fallout from that is catastrophic, is nuclear, right? I think that's incredibly important. But what really struck me to my core, right, is when you talked about speaking to one of our elders, right, and hearing them, because I think so often it's easy. Child, I know for me, it's real easy to be like, oh my gosh, oh,
it's burning down.
The roof is on fire. How we gonna put it out? This is the hardest it's ever been. You know, it's really hard to go full Shakespeare, okay? And so, and that is why it is so incredibly important to have our elders and to lean on our elders, especially in times like this where we have folks who can show us, like, baby, we ain't too far removed.
Okay.
We ain't too far removed from the 60s. We ain't too far removed from Jim Crow. We ain't too far removed from slavery.
Listen.
All right. And that is so grounding and centering in a time where we're dealing with real censorship.
Yeah.
We're dealing with real systems that are doing their best to return to historical norms of structural oppression, of structural racism, of systemic racism,
misogyny.
Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
So now more than ever, now as ever, it is so incredibly important for us to be leaning into and thinking about our elders. And on the opposite side of that spectrum that you talked about, uplifting our youth.
Yeah.
Making it our priority to support youth to understand, because somewhere along the way, a lot is lost in translation, whether it be from the education system. We won't even go down the rabbit hole. Although I know you're a previous educator, and so I'm already knowing you hip. You're hip to the ways in which our education system is failing disproportionately certain communities, and it's just all together failing to support civically engaged, civic-minded, civically aware adults.
And it's on purpose. It really is on purpose. And, you know, the other piece of advice that I would give is I took some time, because that was a lot, you know, during that time, because, you know, I'm being attacked, but I'm still a CEO. You know, I still have to keep moving. I still, you know, my team is nervous, you know, but one of the things that I spent some time doing, I really looked a lot at Fannie Lou Hamer.
That's my girl right there.
For a lot of different reasons that people probably wouldn't think about. So when I think about Fannie Lou Hamer, I think about a plus-size, dark-skinned black woman from the South. And, you know, I think about some of the things that, people were, saying about me, you know, in some of these attacks. And I think about, my God, what would Fannie do? You know, what would she do?
WWFD?
Right.
Hello.
Instead of, you know, what would Jesus do? Shout out Jesus. But then also, what would you know, Fannie Lou do? Right. And I, you know, reread a lot of works and, you know, articles and historical things about her, and it really helped me to understand the importance of sacrifice. So, you know, that's why it was so important to me. I literally had to tell people, do not tussle with these people on social media. We gonna let the ignorance, keep being ignorant until it fizzles out, you know? But the outpouring of love, shout out to Mustafa Ali Santiago, Dr. Mustafa Ali Santiago. He definitely gave words of, you know, encouragement. He was like, I mean, when you start making it there, that means you have arrived, right? In the movement. I must be doing something right. So yeah, we're going to push through. We're going to push through.
And on to the next one. On that note.
Yes.
All right. Moving forward. So we're living in a time right now where the federal government is, as we said, actively making strides toward regression, right? You said don't mince words, and so we're living in a time where our federal administration is intentionally subjugating communities, right? Is intentionally intentionally arresting, intentionally, there's so much, and you said it, chaos. Yeah. It's mass chaos, causing mass confusion, causing mass chaos, mass concern, mass anxiety. So when the federal government stops doing their job, when the federal government decides, that they would like to make a shift in democracy, all right, which is in the enforcement of the law, ultimately. Like, if you read the Constitution, if you go back to the foundation, which is enforcement of the law, the burden of protection often falls on state and local jurisdictions. So how can local activists effectively leverage their state level, city level, county level power, regardless of who's sitting in the Oval Office?
Yeah, so I want to start by first saying, like, when you talked about confusion, this must be my granny, rest her soul. The devil is the author of confusion.
I feel like
and
we're going
so
to church today.
I think, I know, right? Do a church rock. But I think to answer that question, again, everything has to go back to history. When has the government best served black folk? They haven't. They literally haven't. And there have been points in time, like, as it relates to laws, like, not being, like, implemented effectively for black people, or laws that were literally blatantly racist. That still happens today. And so there was a time in this country where we were self-sufficient as a people because we didn't have a choice. And, unfortunately, over time, there was a bit of complacency, like that the progress that we were experiencing, that it was fixed, and that, like, we would, just steadily going up, like,
it would continue.
Right. But baby, if you go up a ladder, guess what? You can still fall back down and you have to start back up again. And so I think from a community perspective, it's important for us to write our own terms for what we want. And also understand, and not even just understand, but let people know we are a significant tax base. So what you're not going to do is use our money and think you're going to treat us any kind of way. Now, it's one thing for, these folks up here on Pennsylvania Avenue to act a fool, but it's another at the state level, at the local level. And so one of the things that I think that we can truly do, even despite what's going on at the federal level, is spend a lot of time thinking about guardrails that you have absolute control of at the local and the state level. So I want to give quickly a tangible example. So in Memphis, which Memphis is, it has been in the news, child. Oh my gosh. But in Memphis, and I won't go into super detail, but we are having an issue with data centers. And so, like, a lot of people across the nation are not happy about these data centers, except for oligarchs and billionaires. And so essentially what we have been able to do and to mobilize is talking about community benefits, right? That's not something that we had ever really talked about before. And mobilizing community around not just understanding what they are, but also building the capacity of community members, especially from frontline communities, to demand it. Don't ask, but demand. You are going to do this. Being able to literally, like, have an opportunity to draft ordinances. So I think about locally, again, and this will be the last example that I give, but it's a good one. So also in my beloved hometown, Memphis, with permitting. So a lot of the polluters that come into our communities, I mean, they just, steamroll through the permitting process, whether it be air permits, whether it be land use. And so historically in Memphis with air permits, you didn't have to have a hearing. Like the people submit, like the industry or developers submits their application, like our local health department, which is the regulator, they just post it on a website. If you want to submit a comment, sure, and they just pass out these permits like candy. It's a brand new day. So we mobilized with community, and we got a resolution passed with this air permit, you must have a public hearing that is subject to public comment. That is the first time in the history of the county and the city where there had been a public hearing where you got to hear from community and not from, the corporate people that they flew in, that's speaking on behalf of the industry, but you hear from the people that are directly being impacted. So, I would say that the beauty in all of that is that it was very diverse, still very Black, but very diverse. So you had like people, it was intergenerational. You had young people. Oh, that gave me joy. You also had people who were business owners. You had people that work in like social services. You even had like people behind the scenes that actually work in government that were like, I'm not with this, right?
Yeah.
So it really almost gave me chills to think about like we are truly doing the civil rights movement 2.0 at this point, so there's still ways to not just simply make noise, but demand reform, because a lot of the oppression that we see is local. Politics, is very much so local. So there's still opportunities to resist but reimagine what we would like to see in these communities that have been historically disenfranchised.
Reimagine is so good. I feel like, again, I'm just like, wow, my brain is going in a million different directions. We talk about this regularly, right? We talk regularly on this show and have for seasons about the incredible importance of community organizing, of understanding how local infrastructure operates, of understanding who your politicians and representatives are, of understanding how your city council functions, right? Of understanding how you can create, or not even create, but tap into collective power in ways that truly do make a difference, right? Because in reality, like you said, for a long time historically, we had to tap into collective power because that was the only opportunity. We knew that we couldn't depend on the federal government. We knew that we could not depend on the state or represent. And so we had to show up. We had to find ways to make our voices heard. And so that is so incredibly important. And it sticks out to me because we as individuals, as the electorate, as citizens, young, old, and everybody along the spectrum, now more than ever need to be very clear about what we can put our hands to. Now, you can't put your hands to everything.
Not everything.
All right.
Work in your ministry.
You gotta find your lane and drive in it. Okay. But it's very important right now that we be very clear about where our hand, like if it's you need to send a letter, you need to send an email, you need to call, you need to show up, you need to offer someone a ride. You need to vote. You need to vote. You need to vote locally. You don't need to just vote when it's the federal election. It's a lot more elections that happen between, that 4-year span. It's so incredibly important that we are having conversations about how we can get involved. So thank you so much for uplifting that. And now as we move forward, during the Biden-Harris administration, we know that many of the historic barriers experienced by EJ orgs accessing federal grants changed tremendously. He was making, in his administration, I should say, was making a lot of efforts surrounding capacity building, technical assistance, creating more opportunities for funds to reach the grassroots level and not just pool at the treetops, right? So we know that a lot of changes were being made, but the majority of those funds have been illegally rolled back over this last year or so under the current administration. How can the movement build economic sovereignty through community-led green cooperatives, private philanthropy, or impact investing to ensure the work continues even without federal funding? Child, how do we step into that fiscal power? Okay.
So I'm gonna make this plain. With EJ organizations, particularly Black-led and Black woman-led organizations, we weren't getting federal funding like that anyway. So we kind of can't miss what we didn't have, right? Now, what I will say, and this is an interesting pivot, if you will. What I am seeing is, because there was so much investment in the previous administration, not even just necessarily with federal funding, but then also like a lot of philanthropy also, but put a lot of emphasis on matching Justice 40, for example, and really getting creative around establishing equity in funding, and then also kind of shifting the culture around Black, Latino, Indigenous organizations as being risk, right, with investment. So it's a very interesting thing that happened. So all we needed was some money, just a little bit, just
throw me a bag,
just so we can, get straight, get our capacity. And so what I have observed, and this is like from my own experience, is a lot of these private philanthropic, foundations and whatnot, they're like, oh, it's really been Black people, Latino people, and Indigenous people that was really doing all the work. Epiphany. We literally been trying to tell you that the whole time. And so a lot of the barriers that were experienced with being able to tap into philanthropic dollars beyond like a $20,000 grant, you can't pay no better with that, right? So I think like it kind of broadened the perspective of a lot of people that work, in charitable giving and philanthropy, where one, starting to trust, Black folks with money, and stop thinking that, we don't know how to run successful businesses, right? And so, I'll be honest, in a lot of instances, when I am in spaces with big green organizations and, other like white-led organizations, they are unraveling because they've always had that federal funding. Yep. You took something from me and other EJ organizations where we were doing this work for free. When I started Black Millennials for Flint, I had a full-time job. I was literally paying out of pocket to have people who needed to get to talk to Congress during the Flint water crisis, out of pocket, paying for hotel rooms, paying for flights. Right? So I'm like, we are resilient, and I think that, one, we have to be reminded of that. But then also, two, one of the things that I think is really, really critical in this particular point in time is when we think about environmental justice organizations, sure, we have to do a lot of resistance work around like policy, around like resisting pollution, in our respective communities. But there's also opportunity around workforce development. That's never going away. That's never going away. So that is typically something, regardless of where you sit on the aisle, is like a common goal, right? And so I think that still carrying on from the Biden-Harris administration, when they did, this record-breaking investment like in climate jobs or green jobs, where we know that that's now a dirty word, but whatever, a plumber, that's a green job. Indoor air assessment, outdoor air quality assessment, lead service line replacement. I mean, there's a myriad of various things that we need to do, as opposed to, just being a consumer. We need to be able to be self-sufficient to provide these services because we've done it before. In 1955, if you were in Jackson, Mississippi, you probably couldn't have a white plumber to come to your black house. You had to get a black plumber. So, we really have to, again, like, study history, and learn from history, and know that, like, we, even more than, back then, we are still well resourced. Mm-hmm. We are. Like, we truly, as a collective, like, we have buying power. Hello. So I think, as a community, we just have to remember who we are and who we come from, and really think about, how do we never get in predicaments where we are so dependent on our oppressor that we become complacent with victimhood?
That's so good. That's and mic drop. Okay. Yes, you said so much that was excellent. Fund development and that is complex, especially in this season, and that's an area where I've spent a lot of time during my career. And to add on to what you already settled such a great foundation for, revenue diversification.
That part.
And you said it in so many words, but just to name out loud, it is so important to diversify your revenue structure so that it is not predominantly or majorly supported by grants.
Right.
Whether that be federal, whether that be local, whether that be statewide, because when that is the case, when 50+% of your budget is dependent upon, which is a lot of grassroots organizations. That's a reality. A lot of folks start there. But when you're in that position, the reality is that you are dependent upon the agenda set by those institutions. So if the agenda shifts, if the narrative changes, if the priorities are adjusted by whoever that group of influence is, by whatever that institution is, that will affect your ability to provide the resources that you know are supporting your community, right? Yeah. And so it's incredibly important, to your point, for grassroots organizations to understand what is marketable, what is profitable, right? Understanding merchandising, right? Understanding how to diversify into contractual services, understanding investment, investing in land, utilizing the resources that are available so that when this occurs again, because it will occur again, history always repeats itself, especially when we're unaware of what previously occurred, right? So in times when we allow ourselves to slip and slide into complacency, when we allow ourselves to just lose sight, right? Losing that laser focus and awareness to be in tune with the shifting of the winds, right? In so many words, it is always going to be difficult to bet your savings. Okay. Ooh. And so it's important to have a war chest. It's important. It's so important to have a war chest. And so that like that for nonprofit organizations, and in addition to that, it's so important for communities of color, for low-income communities, for historically divested communities to understand the power that comes, again, in collaboration, right? Now more than ever is the time to check in on your sister, brother, org, to be like, hey, how y'all doing over there?
Yeah, and pull resources together, because that's what we used to do, because we didn't have a choice.
Hello.
And we still don't have a choice.
Your lights is off, ours is on.
Right.
Our heat don't work, but yours.
Right.
Look, what can we do? Do we need to combine offices?
Listen.
Do we need to maybe close our separate locations and find a space where we can operate together, even if it's just for a season and a reason? All right. These may not be lifetime fixes, and sometimes, we can become afraid, but because we live in a capitalistic society, like this idea of competition. Yeah. Right, that like, I have to be the best. I have to keep my edge, right? Mm-hmm. As long as you have your unique experience and expertise, there is nothing, nobody can edge you out of that. Okay. And so now more than ever, it's so incredibly important to band arms, right? And to be very clear about who your allies are, to know who your team is, and to be able to take time to really sit and be strategic, about resources which are finite and limited. There's only so many dollars. There's only so many grant dollars. There's only so much. So how can we get creative in this season? How can we, like you said, pull community resources, look in your pocket, talk to your neighbor. They probably got some pocket change. Can we recycle bottles? I remember there was a season, I was a young folk now, and we used to go around neighborhoods asking folks to collect they pop bottles, they pop cans.
That's sustainability.
Hello, recycle. In the state of Michigan, at least. I don't know how it is everywhere, but in the state of Michigan, return them bottles, get your little 10 cents per bottle. I'm just saying, like, there are so many different ways that we can be tapping into available resources and getting creative right now. In addition to that, it's also thinking about what free or low cost time, talent, and resources are available. Right? Do your cousin know how to do some of them services you was contracting for before, right? Like,
and build your own skill set. Can you learn how to do it?
How can we tap into, again, those are resources. Your internal, your communal, your familial. Like, we really need to get back into Eastern practices of community, right? Like, does your neighbor know how to do it? Can the person across the street, having conversation about how we can show up for one another in these times, like, that is a resource.
Yes, indeed.
That is a resource, and we need to do a better job collectively, myself included, of seeing the resources beyond just dollar amounts, right? Understanding that there's so much more that goes into this work and is required for this work. And on that note, okay, moving right along, because, I know I could stand on that box. I could stand on that box all day. So in a new era, it's a whole new era. Hello.
A whole new world, but not like Jasmine said.
Oh my goodness. It's not nearly as cute. It's not cute. Where federal monitoring and data transparency may completely disappear. We are facing great challenges in those areas. How can grassroots organizations utilize low cost? We were just talking about this. Pinch and pennies. Low cost technology and citizen science to hold polluters accountable, shifting the power dynamic away from centralized agencies and back to the people who've been serving at the ground level the entire time.
Yeah, so I actually want to uplift two very important people in the movement that essentially build the foundation for what used to exist, like the EPA EJ screening tool, which went away, the CJUST, or the Climate Economic Justice Screening Tool, that also went away. So I mentioned earlier, one of my favorites, Dr. Beverly Wright, literally in the 90s, was the pioneer of integrating GIS systems with environmental pollution.
What's GIS?
So GIS, I'm like, what does GIS stand for? GIS is like mapping. So the same type of system that you use like in your GPS is built on GIS. Like if you live somewhere and you can like tap in like a address and it can populate something, GIS. So essentially her connection with data and environmental pollution set the framework for what we now know and understand around Cancer Alley. And so, again, that's Black people work, right? And so in the previous administration, there was actually a lot of investment around data and building data systems. That's knowledge that can't be taken away. You can take the funding away from it. You can take it off of your federal websites, but that doesn't mean that you can't still maintain a website at Tennessee State University, right? That means that, you can take away, some of these systems that were built outside of the parameters of government. One of the things that just, as Black people, as Latino people, as Indigenous people, we always have to prove our burdens. We've always had to do that. And so when you mention the aspect around citizen science, there is no greater expert than a person that is being directly impacted. And so I think, building again capacity. We have, statisticians, we have data scientists where this is their, lifelong body of work is understanding how to use data to tell a story. We still have that knowledge, right? And so we can build our own databases. These federal databases, they were not perfect. They definitely had flaws, right? And so, I think like what has happened now, because it was, even for that brief amount of time with 4 years, there's more and more like young people and students now where they now know like, ooh, this is a need. This is a gap, where I can fill in. I think about with Dr. Bullard down in Texas. A lot of his students, are working at the intersection of like data science and environment. So it literally is an investment. Shout out to the HBCUs where we have the resources where we can pool our own data, because we're going to trust our own data before the government anyway, because again, we have to go back. When has this data served Black people? Even when they were collecting it, it still was abysmal. Like I think about some of the longest standing federally collected data was civil rights data. So as a former educator, on a recurring time frame, we had to submit all of this data to the Office of Civil Rights, where it, pretty much like looked at like truancy, it looked at like academic achievement, it looked at a myriad of things. And it looked at, like college readiness. It looked bad every year for Black folks. So even though you're collecting this data, the data still looks bad.
Are we addressing it?
So, understanding like, yes, we have the baseline of like what, is happening. But now I want to be able to be solutions oriented. So are we starting to see, a different pattern than what we have seen before? So, the theme is reimagine. What, as people of color, how do we reimagine how we use data and not allowing a colonial, white supremacist system to inform how we view our numbers about ourselves?
And it goes back to your power, like recognizing we live in such a time of disillusionment. We live in such a time where of desensitization, right, where we are just so comfortable, where society is so comfortable accepting that this is just how the world works, right? Like that it's been this way long enough, or that it's not so bad, until it's on your front porch. And this has been a season in an administration where it's touching a lot of our front porches, it's touching a lot of our cities,
regardless
it's touching
of
a lot of
race, gender,
it's
baby.
not, man.
No, ain't nobody safe.
It's coming down. And so it's so incredibly important, like you said, for us to have a great understanding of the infrastructures that have been built independent of government, right? And what we can continue to build upon, right? Because again, speaking historically, that was the cadence. Wasn't nobody waiting on permission or say so. Nobody was waiting on the president to tell them, you may serve your a community. You may get you may find the resources that you need. Folk was going out to get theirs. I'm getting it for me. I'm getting it for my babies. I'm getting it for my family. I'm getting it for my folks. I'm getting it for my community, my city, my state. And we have to return to that drive, that fire that for so long, for generations, supported our predecessors to get the job done when you didn't have administrative support. Right now, like I said, and it's why it's important for us to lean on our elders. It's why it's important for us to consult and keep our elders close to us, because sometimes in our youth, we feel like we know it and we got it. Everybody
like you
a fighter.
Got your degree and you think you know everything.
Man, everybody's a fighter till you get punched in the face, and then it's like, woo. Wait a minute, right? And so now it is incredibly important for us to, we got to go back. We got to go back to the basics, we got to get back to the fundamentals.
Facts.
We have to remember at the core and at the root of it is liberation.
That's
right. At the core and at the root of it is basic human rights. At the core and at the root of it is the civil rights that have been fought for. We must not lose ground. We have to. Now is the time for us to dig in. If there were never a time, and there's always been time, especially for the communities existing in the margins, right? There's always been a time. But if there were never a time before, now is the time for us to dig our heels in. We cannot afford the generations to follow us cannot afford to lose ground. We have to, you've been saying, we got to stand on business.
Listen.
10 toes. You might have to put your fingers in the mud too. Okay?
Listen.
Now is the time. Now is the time to stand.
We all got to be in the trenches sometimes.
Man. And it's a trench. Now it's a trench if I've ever known one. Okay? Now is the time to dig in. And just like that, girl, we at the end.
Ooh.
We coming to a close. And so as we prepare to wrap this thing up, our first episode of season 6, as we prepare to wrap it up and come to the end of another amazing episode with the LaTricea Adams, we always like to leave with a call to action, but you know that. So how, right now, when it's time to dig in the trenches of it all, how do we build a resilient movement that prioritizes unity with labor, housing, and civil rights group to create a unified front that is too large for any administration to ignore or obstruct?
Yeah, so, even though it seems really cliche, I'm gonna break it down where I'm gonna lean into
break it down.
this person, especially since we're in January and we will be acknowledging the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, clearly, like a lot of the things that we see in mainstream media that kind of romanticize Dr. King is like very cutesy,
the peace,
right?
Nonviolence. He was
Martin
about that
Luther King
life.
stood on business.
He
stood on business. But one of the things that was so profound in his last days on earth was he cracked the code. Right now, there is a demonic spirit in the atmosphere that is making it seem like this is a race war. It is not. The enemy is the oligarchs and the billionaires that have a complete lack of regard for humanity, right? And when you think about the poor people's movement, he cracked the code. We've been saying as historically oppressed people, like white folk, not just poor white folks, middle class white folks too. You're not a part of the billionaire club. You are. And so as we start to see, some of these resources hitting white America. When I think about white health insurance, even with the government layoffs, right? Where, it might have been a good punch, where a lot of like Black women, for example, are now unemployed. A lot of them, have federal jobs, but the majority of people that work for the federal government were white Americans. And so, when you think about the American dream that we're all socialized to go after, who is interfering with that dream? Mm-hmm. It's not me, where, they came for me last year talking about she just a school teacher. Okay, it's not me, So I think that it has to be a point of awakening where we understand where our oppression comes from.
Come on.
Like we got to stop this foolishness. It's really quite silly. It's embarrassing, at this point.
As a nation.
Like, we are all down bad. The only individuals who are living like their best lives right now are oligarchs, are the billionaires. And the rhetoric that people and the philosophies that people are leaning into with this massive, misinformation campaign, thinking that they're in the same ballpark, and can cozy up with a billionaire when you live in rural Tennessee or rural Alabama or wherever, So, stop the foolishness. Stop the foolishness. It is a class war. And it has always been a class war. It has always been an attack on the welfare economics of this country. And on top of that, and this stems back to Nixon, even on up to Reagan.
Come on, history.
With the lack of regard for intellectualism. I would be remiss not to, say that as we wrap up. As a Black woman, it is a reason why during slavery they didn't want slaves to learn how to read. It's a reason why. It's the reason why, even though this man on Fox News attacked me for being a teacher, Jesus was a teacher.
Come on.
It is a divine ministry. It's a divine ministry, and I know the power of knowledge, the power of literacy. This is a demonic attack. And regardless of if you red, purple, and green, we have to understand how to stand on the business of good and recognize evil and understand that evil doesn't have any purpose to serve humanity.
Oh, that's good. I don't got nothing else to say. She said, and that was it. Stand on the business of good. All right, folks. So as we come to a close, we want to say thank you so much for coming and tuning in for season 6.
Yes.
Episode 1, year 10 of Young, Gifted, and Green.
Yes.
Joining us here with Tracy Adams. We hope to see you very soon.
Bye.